The sun was just beginning to sink behind the distant hills, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The air was dry, carrying the faint scent of dust and wildflowers. In the small town of Red Willow, the streets were quiet, except for the occasional creak of a wooden sign swinging in the evening breeze. Most of the townsfolk had already returned to their homes after a long day of work, leaving the main street almost empty. The peace of the evening was comforting, but it was also fragile, as the town had seen its share of troubles over the years. At the edge of the town, near the narrow trail that led to the surrounding plains and forests, a figure appeared. It was a young native girl, her small frame barely visible in the fading light. Her clothes were worn and dusty, and her feet were bare, leaving prints in the dry soil. She carried a small satchel over her shoulder, worn thin at the edges, as if it had traveled long distances with her. Her dark hair hung in loose strands around her face, damp with tears, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She walked slowly, almost as if she were afraid of being seen or followed. Every few steps, she would glance nervously over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. The townsfolk who were still outside noticed her, and whispers quickly spread. "Look at that girl," one woman said, clutching her basket of vegetables. "She's crying, and she doesn't look like she belongs here." A few men paused in front of their stores, curious but hesitant. They had seen travelers pass through before, but this girl seemed different. There was something about her sadness, something that made even the toughest cowhands feel a tug at their hearts. Yet most people didn't approach her. In Red Willow, strangers were often treated with caution. The town had grown quiet over the years, and its people had learned to keep their distance from trouble, no matter how small it seemed at first. Watching from the shade of an old wooden fence was a cowboy named Jacob. He was known in town for his calm presence and quiet strength. Jacob had spent most of his life on the open plains, riding horses, tending cattle, and helping wherever he could. He had a reputation for being kind but reserved, someone who didn't ask for much in return. He had seen many travelers come and go, and he had learned to read people quickly. Something about the girl caught his attention immediately. It wasn't just her tears. It was the way she carried herself, the way her body seemed tense yet weary. He could sense that she was carrying a heavy burden, even if he didn't yet know what it was. Jacob didn't move toward her at first. He knew that sometimes the best way to help was to wait, to let someone come to you on their own terms. He leaned against the fence, his hat tilted slightly over his eyes, and simply watched. The girl stopped a few feet from the trail, her shoulders hunched, her small hands gripping the strap of her satchel tightly. She seemed frozen, unsure of whether to continue walking or turn back. For a moment, she simply stood there, shivering slightly in the cool evening air, her tears glistening like tiny drops of rain in the last rays of sunlight. Time seemed to stretch. The town around them remained quiet, the only sounds being the occasional creak of a door, the distant call of a bird returning to its nest, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The girl's breathing was uneven, and Jacob could see that she was struggling to hold herself together. He could feel her fear, her pain, and her uncertainty. It was as if the girl had been running for days, both from something external and from her own inner worries. Jacob's experience with people had taught him that sometimes words were not necessary. Sometimes just being there, quietly and steadily, was enough to give someone a sense of safety. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the girl took a tentative step forward. Her eyes met Jacob's briefly, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. She felt a flicker of trust, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger would not judge her or turn her away. Jacob nodded slightly, a gesture of reassurance, letting her know that she was seen and that she was not alone. The girl's hands trembled as she adjusted the satchel on her shoulder, and she took another step, then another, until she was standing only a few feet away from him. The air between them was filled with a quiet tension, the kind that happens when two people, strangers in every sense, meet in a moment of vulnerability. Jacob did not speak immediately. He simply observed, letting the girl gather her courage. He could see that she wanted to say something, but was unsure of what words could capture the storm inside her. Her lips quivered, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Jacob's heart ached at the sight, not because he felt pity, but because he understood the depth of her pain. He had seen sorrow in many forms before, and he knew that it could be heavy enough to crush a person if left alone. At last, the girl found her voice, a soft, shaky whisper that barely carried across the few feet between them. I don't know where to go," she said. Her words were honest, raw, and filled with a fear that she could not hide. Jacob nodded again, his expression calm and gentle. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly, his voice steady and reassuring. Those words, simple as they were, seemed to reach something deep inside her. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt that she could let down the walls she had built around herself. She didn't have to hide her tears or her fear. She didn't have to act brave when she was not. She could just be herself. The girl took a deep breath, letting the tears flow freely. She felt a strange sense of relief, a tiny lifting of the weight she had been carrying alone. Jacob remained quiet, giving her the space she needed. He did not rush her, did not ask questions immediately, and did not offer empty promises. He simply existed as a calm presence, a steady rock in the middle of her storm. Slowly, she began to speak, haltingly at first, about her village, about the troubles that had driven her to leave, and about the fear that had followed her along the dusty trail. Jacob listened carefully, nodding occasionally, showing that he understood without interrupting or judging. As the sun continued to set, the town of Red Willow seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the girl and the cowboy in their small bubble of quiet understanding. The sky darkened, and the first stars began to appear, twinkling faintly in the twilight. The girl, exhausted from both her journey and her emotions, felt a sense of calm that she had not known for a long time. She realized that meeting this cowboy, this stranger who seemed to see her without judgment, might be the first step toward finding safety and a new beginning. And in that quiet moment, under the vast open sky, a fragile but growing trust began to take root, promising that perhaps the long journey she had endured was leading her somewhere she could finally feel a little bit of peace. The young native girl stood for a long moment, her eyes still glistening with tears. She looked at the cowboy, who remained calm and steady, as if the world itself had slowed down around them. His presence was quiet, but it had a strange power, a warmth that made her feel a little safer than she had in days. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the satchel, the weight of it seeming heavier than just the fabric and straps. It carried the weight of her fears, memories, and the uncertainty of the path she had chosen to take. Finally, she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, fragile, yet it carried the depth of her exhaustion and worry. Jacob, the cowboy, nodded, his expression gentle. "It's okay. You don't have to explain everything right away," he said. His words were simple, but they were enough to calm her just a little. She felt that he genuinely meant it. For the first time since she had left her village, she sensed that someone might understand her. Someone might care without demanding anything in return. The girl's gaze drifted toward the horizon, the open plains stretching endlessly under the dimming sky. "I ran away from home," she admitted after a pause, her voice trembling. Something, someone, I didn't want to go back there. She didn't elaborate, but the fear in her eyes spoke volumes. Jacob stayed silent, giving her the space to speak. He didn't push her, didn't ask for details she wasn't ready to share. He had learned long ago that trust couldn't be forced. It had to grow slowly, patiently, like a small seed nurtured in the right conditions. She took another shaky breath and continued, her words spilling out like a river that had been dammed for too long. My family, we've been struggling. I couldn't help them anymore. I thought if I ran, maybe I could find a way to help them from somewhere else. Her voice cracked with emotion, and she buried her face in her hands for a moment. Jacob watched quietly, offering only the reassurance of his presence. He knew that sometimes listening was more important than speaking, that sometimes being silent could say more than any words. The evening air grew cooler, carrying the scent of dry grass and the faint smoke of chimneys from the town behind them. The girl shivered, and Jacob instinctively shifted closer, though still giving her room. It's all right, he said gently. You've done what you needed to do to get here. That takes courage. Courage. The word made her pause. She had never thought of herself as brave. Running away had felt like fear, not courage. But hearing it from him, a stranger who saw her without judgment, made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet pride in her own actions. Slowly, she lowered her hands from her face. Her eyes were red, but there was a spark of something else now, a faint glimmer of hope. I don't even know where to go next, she admitted. Everything feels so big, so, I don't know, scary. Jacob nodded knowingly. The world can feel big and scary sometimes, he said, but it doesn't have to be faced alone. You've got someone here who'll walk with you, at least for a while, until you're ready. His calm, steady words were like a rope thrown into rough waters. She grabbed it instinctively, clinging to the reassurance that she didn't have to face her troubles entirely by herself. Jacob gestured toward the small town behind them, its few dimly lit windows promising shelter and safety. We can find a place for you to rest tonight, he said. Somewhere safe, warm, and quiet. You've been walking far, and your body and mind need a break. The girl nodded slowly, relief washing over her. She had expected suspicion, maybe even harsh words from strangers in the town. Instead, she found kindness and understanding from someone who didn't even know her name yet. It felt strange and comforting all at once, like stepping into sunlight after days spent in shadow. As they walked toward the town together, the girl began to tell Jacob more about her life, though cautiously at first. She spoke of her village, a small community surrounded by forests and streams, where life was simple but hard. Her family had always struggled to make ends meet, relying on hunting, gathering, and small crafts to survive. There had been times when she had helped, but the responsibilities were heavy for someone so young. Her father had fallen ill, and her mother worked long hours to provide food and care, leaving little time for anything else. The girl's own attempts to help often fell short, and the sense of helplessness had weighed heavily on her. Jacob listened intently, nodding as she spoke. He could see the pain in her eyes, the exhaustion in her steps, and the resilience that had kept her moving forward despite everything. You've carried a lot on your shoulders, he said quietly. It's no wonder you're tired and scared. Anyone in your position would feel the same. The girl looked at him, surprised. No one had ever acknowledged her efforts before. People had often judged her for being young, for not being able to fix everything, or for being vulnerable. Jacob didn't judge. He saw her strength and her struggle at the same time, and he let her know that both could exist together. As they entered the town, the streets were growing darker. The dim glow of lanterns illuminated the wooden buildings, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. The girl clutched her satchel tightly, still uncertain, but she felt safer with Jacob nearby. They passed a few townsfolk along the way, shopkeepers closing their stores, children playing quietly in the fading light. Some looked curiously at the girl, but she no longer felt exposed or alone. With Jacob beside her, she felt like she could take a deep breath without fear of judgment. They reached a small inn at the edge of the town. The building was modest, with wooden beams and a stone fireplace that glowed warmly from within. Jacob opened the door and gestured for the girl to step inside. The warmth of the room was immediate, enveloping her like a soft blanket. She inhaled deeply, the scent of wood smoke and cooked food filling her senses. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax just a little, sinking into the comfort of a place that felt welcoming. Jacob spoke to the innkeeper quietly, explaining that the girl needed a safe place to rest. The innkeeper nodded and smiled kindly, offering a small room with a bed and a wash basin. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected such kindness from anyone outside her village. She moved toward the room slowly, still clutching her satchel, but now there was a sense of cautious hope in her step. Jacob stayed near the doorway, giving her a moment to settle in. "Take your time," he said softly. "There's no rush. You've already done enough for one day." The girl looked at him, feeling a mix of gratitude and something she couldn't quite name. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she simply nodded, a small gesture, yet one that carried more meaning than she could express. Jacob smiled gently, understanding that sometimes actions spoke louder than words. He knew that she needed time to regain her strength both physically and emotionally before she could fully trust anyone or share her deeper fears. That night, as the girl lay on the soft bed, she thought about the events of the day. She had left her village in fear, carrying only her satchel and her worries. She had walked a long, lonely path, unsure of what she would find or who she could trust. And yet, in a small town on the edge of the plains, she had met someone who saw her for who she was, someone who didn't demand bravery or perfection, someone who simply offered understanding and kindness. It was a small, fragile hope, but it was enough to let her sleep more peacefully than she had in weeks. Outside the window, the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky, each one a tiny reminder that even in the darkest times, there could be light. The girl clutched her satchel close, feeling its weight as both a reminder of her journey and a symbol of her resilience. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt that she would not have to face it alone. The next morning, the sun rose over Red Willow with a soft, golden light that warmed the streets and the faces of those still awake. The town had begun its daily routines, with shopkeepers opening their stores, the blacksmith hammering metal in rhythm with the sounds of the town, and children laughing as they ran through the dusty lanes. But for the young native girl, the world felt different this morning. The warmth of the inn, the kindness she had received, and the presence of the cowboy beside her gave her a strange, comforting sense of security. She had spent nights under the open sky, always alert and ready to run. Now, for the first time in a long while, she could breathe a little easier, knowing that someone was watching over her. Jacob, the cowboy, had arrived early at the inn, as he often did in towns he visited. He had ridden from a nearby ranch at first light, and his hat was tipped low against the sun. He watched the girl quietly as she prepared for the day. Her movements were slow, hesitant, but there was determination in the way she arranged her belongings and straightened her posture. Jacob had learned over the years that actions often spoke louder than words, and today her actions told him that she wanted to try again, to take small steps toward feeling safe and capable. He approached her gently. "Are you ready for breakfast?" he asked, his voice calm and encouraging. The girl nodded, still clutching her satchel, though she was beginning to relax. Together they stepped into the small dining area of the inn. The smell of fresh bread, cooked eggs, and coffee filled the air, making the girl's stomach rumble despite her nerves. The innkeeper greeted them with a warm smile and a plate of food, and for the first time in days, the girl felt something like normalcy. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Jacob spoke to her softly about the town, the people, and small details that made the place feel familiar. As they walked outside after breakfast, Jacob suggested showing her around the town. The girl hesitated at first, unsure if she could trust anyone beyond the cowboy, but the thought of exploring with someone who had shown her kindness gave her courage. They walked slowly, passing the general store, the blacksmith, and the small schoolhouse where children were already reciting their lessons. The townsfolk glanced at them curiously, some whispering, some nodding politely. The girl felt the eyes on her, but with Jacob by her side, she didn't feel fear. She felt a cautious sense of belonging. Jacob stopped near the town square, pointing to a small fountain in the center. "This is where people gather for news, trade, and sometimes just to meet friends," he explained. "It's a place where you can see the heart of the town." The girl listened, her eyes wide with curiosity. She had lived in a village surrounded by nature, where people knew each other well, but there was something different about a town like this, so open, yet filled with strangers. She realized that while towns could feel intimidating, they could also offer opportunities she hadn't imagined. As the day went on, Jacob and the girl spent time learning small tasks together. He taught her how to care for a horse, how to tie knots, and even how to read some signs that indicated danger or safety. Each task was small, simple, but it carried meaning. The girl began to understand that she had skills she could rely on, skills that could help her survive and even thrive in a new environment. With every new lesson, she gained confidence. She began to smile more freely, her laughter coming quietly at first, then growing with each passing hour. The townsfolk began to notice the changes in her. They saw a girl who had arrived frightened and uncertain, now walking with a little more confidence, carrying herself with a sense of dignity. Some approached cautiously, offering small gestures of kindness, water from a well, a loaf of bread, or just a warm nod. The girl was wary at first, unsure if they could be trusted, but Jacob stayed close, quietly teaching her that trust could be given slowly, one action at a time. Each act of kindness she received, she began to return, helping carry bundles for an elderly woman or showing a younger child how to tie a simple knot. With every small interaction, her world became a little brighter, a little more connected. As the sun climbed higher, Jacob suggested they take a short ride outside the town to the nearby plains. He had brought a calm, gentle horse for her to ride, and at first the girl hesitated. She had ridden horses before, but her confidence had been shaken by fear and exhaustion. Jacob didn't rush her. Instead, he guided her slowly, showing her how to sit comfortably and how to speak softly to the animal. The girl's hands trembled as she adjusted the reins, but Jacob's calm presence gave her courage. When she finally mounted the horse, the sense of freedom took her by surprise. The wind in her hair, the gentle rhythm of the horse's steps, and the open sky above made her heart feel lighter. Riding alongside Jacob, she began to talk more freely about her past. She spoke of her village, her family, and the responsibilities she had left behind. She didn't share every detail, but she revealed enough to show that she had been strong in ways few could imagine. Jacob listened without interruption, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. "You've done well to make it this far," he said. "It's not easy to face the unknown, especially when you've been through so much. But you're here, and that says a lot about your strength." The girl felt a warmth in his words, a reassurance that she hadn't felt in a long time. As the afternoon passed, they returned to town, the girl more confident with each step. She began to notice the small joys around her, the laughter of children, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer, the scent of fresh bread from the baker. The world didn't seem so big and frightening anymore. She realized that even in a place full of strangers, there could be moments of connection and understanding. And with Jacob by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. By evening, they returned to the inn. The girl helped Jacob care for the horse, brushing its coat and feeding it, her hands steady and sure. Jacob smiled, pleased with her progress. "You're learning fast," he said, "more than you realize." She looked at him, a small, genuine smile forming on her lips. For the first time, she felt that she could trust someone completely, that she didn't have to hide her fears or her tears. She could be herself, and someone could still care for her. That night, as they sat by the fire in the inn, the girl and Jacob shared stories of their lives. She spoke of her village, the quiet mornings by the river, and the way the sun would rise over the trees, casting golden light across the fields. Jacob spoke of life on the plains, the long rides across open land, and the quiet moments when the stars were the only company. Through their stories, a bond began to grow, one built on respect, understanding, and the shared recognition of each other's struggles. The girl realized that she was not alone, that someone could see her fully and still accept her. The townsfolk continued to watch quietly, noticing the changes in the girl. She was no longer the frightened child who had appeared at the edge of town days ago. She moved with purpose, spoke with growing confidence, and laughed with genuine joy. Jacob's guidance and kindness had helped her open a door she had thought was closed forever, a door to trust, hope, and a sense of belonging. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, the girl felt a calm settle over her. She had survived the journey, faced her fears, and taken the first steps toward a new life. With Jacob's steady presence beside her, she knew that she could continue to grow, learn, and face the challenges that lay ahead. And in that quiet, shared moment by the fire, she understood something important. Courage was not just about facing danger, it was about opening your heart, trusting in others, and allowing yourself to be seen for who you truly were. The next few days in Red Willow passed with a quiet rhythm. The girl had settled into the routine of the town, and her bond with Jacob, the cowboy, had grown stronger. She helped in small ways around the inn, learned new tasks in town, and even began to make tentative connections with a few townsfolk. Life felt calmer, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. But even in this sense of peace, a shadow lingered, a feeling that the troubles she had tried to leave behind were not gone, only delayed. It happened on a late afternoon when the sky was painted in shades of orange and deep purple. The girl had been walking to the market to pick up supplies with Jacob by her side. Her steps were light, and she was beginning to laugh at a small story Jacob had shared, a sound that had not come from her in weeks. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a figure approaching quickly, with a determined and threatening look. Her stomach tightened, and fear instantly returned. She froze, her heart pounding as memories of the dangers she had fled from rushed back. The man who approached was familiar, though she had hoped never to see him again. His presence carried authority and menace, and she realized that he had followed her from her village, intent on forcing her to return. The girl's body trembled, and her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to hide in the open street. Jacob noticed the change in her instantly. He saw the tension in her body, the sudden fear in her eyes, and the small tremble of her hands. Without hesitation, he stepped slightly in front of her, a calm shield between her and the approaching figure. "You don't need to be afraid," Jacob said firmly but quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made the girl feel both protected and grounded. The man's eyes flicked toward him, and for a moment, there was a silent standoff. Jacob did not move aggressively. He simply stood steady, a pillar of strength. The girl, watching him, felt a spark of courage she had not known she possessed. Seeing someone willing to stand for her gave her the first hint that she could face this danger without collapsing into fear. The man spoke, his voice harsh. "You belong with us. You can't run forever. Come back or face the consequences." The girl swallowed hard, fear clawing at her throat. She felt the weight of the journey she had undertaken, the countless steps she had taken to find safety, and the possibility that it might all be undone in an instant. Jacob, sensing her panic, laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not going anywhere you don't choose," he said calmly. "You have a right to make your own decisions, and I'm not letting anyone threaten you while I'm here." The girl felt something shift inside her. She had run for so long, hiding, trembling, never trusting anyone. But now, with Jacob standing beside her, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite fear. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and drew a deep breath. Her hands clenched at her sides, and for the first time, she did not feel entirely powerless. Jacob guided her a few steps forward, positioning himself so that she was slightly behind him, safe, but able to see clearly. The man's eyes narrowed, realizing that the girl was no longer the frightened child he had expected. She stood tall, her voice trembling slightly, but strong enough to carry across the street. "I won't go with you," she said firmly. "I can make my own choices. I am not afraid to stand for myself." Her words, though soft, held a power that even Jacob felt. The fear that had once held her captive was still there, but it no longer controlled her. The man's expression changed, frustration flickering across his face. He had not expected resistance, certainly not from someone so young, but the girl did not waver, and Jacob's calm presence reinforced her courage. He didn't say much, but his stance, his steady gaze, and the way he subtly moved closer to her gave her strength. She realized that she did not need to face him alone. She had support, she had allies, and she had her own inner resilience that she had begun to trust. The confrontation did not last long, though it felt eternal to the girl. Seeing that she would not submit easily, the man finally turned and walked away, muttering threats that the girl barely heard. The tension in her body slowly released, and she felt a trembling relief wash over her. Jacob remained by her side, steady and reassuring. "You did well," he said quietly. "You faced fear, and you didn't let it control you. That's bravery, true bravery." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but these were different from before. They were tears of relief, of empowerment, of discovering her own strength. Over the next few days, the girl's sense of self grew stronger. She continued her routines in town, learning skills, helping where she could, and connecting with others. She no longer felt entirely at the mercy of her fears. Jacob continued to guide her, not by leading her blindly, but by teaching her to rely on her own judgment, her own courage. Each task she completed, each small decision she made, reinforced her belief that she could handle challenges and protect herself when needed. One afternoon, while helping a local farmer gather hay, the girl laughed freely at a small joke Jacob made. The sound surprised her because it felt light, pure, and unburdened by the constant worry she had carried for weeks. She realized that part of her fear had been carrying alone, hiding in silence. With someone she trusted, with someone who believed in her, she could find moments of joy even in difficult times. That realization was freeing, and it made her feel more alive than she had in a long while. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town, the girl and Jacob returned to the inn. The girl paused for a moment, looking at the town square bustling with evening activity. She realized that she was no longer invisible, no longer someone to be overlooked or feared for. She had begun to carve a place for herself, not just in the town, but within her own heart. The fear that had once been constant still lingered, but it was no longer paralyzing. She had faced danger, and she had discovered her own strength. That night, as she lay in bed, the girl thought about the events of the day. She reflected on the confrontation, on the fear that had returned so suddenly, and on how she had responded. The feelings of empowerment and relief mingled with lingering anxiety, but she understood that both could exist at the same time. She no longer needed to pretend to be fearless. She only needed to trust herself and the support she had received from Jacob. That trust, that quiet sense of being understood and protected, gave her hope that she could continue to face challenges with courage and wisdom. Jacob, sitting quietly by the window, watched over her without intrusion. He understood the delicate balance of giving someone support while allowing them to grow independently. He had seen the change in her over the past days, from a frightened, tearful girl to someone who could stand her ground, speak her mind, and face fear with determination. That growth, small as it might seem, was remarkable. He felt a quiet pride in her resilience and courage, knowing that she was beginning to realize her own strength. The girl's thoughts turned to her village, to the family she had left behind, and to the responsibilities that had once felt impossible to bear. She understood that she could not erase her past, but she could approach it differently now, with confidence, courage, and the support of someone she trusted. The path ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to face it, step by step. The fear that had once ruled her no longer had the same power. She had confronted it, and in doing so she had discovered her own inner strength. As the stars twinkled in the night sky above Red Willow, the girl felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had faced the threat from her past, protected herself, and learned to trust in her own courage. With Jacob's steady presence by her side, she knew she could continue to grow, to learn, and to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. The night was quiet, but within the girl, a new light had been kindled. A light of courage, hope, and the understanding that she did not have to face the world alone. The days that followed in Red Willow brought a new rhythm to the young native girl's life. The town that had once seemed intimidating and unfamiliar now felt like a place where she could breathe, learn, and grow. The bonds she had begun to form with Jacob, the cowboy, and a few kind townsfolk gave her a sense of stability she had not known in months. Each morning, she awoke with a sense of quiet purpose, ready to face the day and discover more about herself and the world around her. She spent her mornings helping Jacob with the horses and the small ranch tasks he occasionally took care of for the town. She learned to saddle a horse, brush its coat, and even guide it along the open plains with growing confidence. With each lesson, her movements became steadier, her voice firmer, and her laughter more frequent. The horse, patient and gentle, seemed to respond to her growing self-assurance, and every ride reminded her of the freedom and strength she now possessed. In the afternoons, she explored the town further. She visited the small general store to learn how to select and weigh goods, helped the baker carry fresh bread to the market, and even began to teach a few younger children the simple skills she had mastered, like tying knots or identifying plants. These small tasks gave her a sense of purpose. She realized that she could contribute meaningfully to the lives of others, that she was not simply a visitor in Red Willow, but a growing part of the community. Jacob watched her quietly, always nearby but never overbearing. He knew that independence was built gradually, and that true trust came from experience rather than words alone. Sometimes they would sit under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of town, sharing quiet moments and stories. He spoke of his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons life had taught him. The girl, in turn, shared tales of her village, of the rivers and forests, of quiet mornings and the smell of earth after rain. Through these stories, she felt her past and present blending together, forming a foundation she could stand on without fear. One day, while walking through the market square, she noticed that townsfolk were beginning to treat her differently. Instead of cautious glances or whispers, they offered nods, smiles, and small acts of kindness. The girl realized that she was no longer seen as a frightened stranger. She was someone who had faced challenges, who had shown courage, and who now carried herself with confidence. Each interaction, no matter how small, reinforced her belief that she belonged here and could create a life for herself built on trust, effort, and kindness. Despite her growing sense of safety, she never forgot the lessons of courage she had learned when confronting the man from her past. That moment had taught her that fear was natural, but it didn't have to control her. It had also shown her the value of having someone who believed in her, someone who would stand by her when she couldn't stand alone. Jacob had been that person, quietly guiding her without ever taking away her autonomy, helping her see that bravery was about making choices even when the heart was afraid. As weeks turned into months, the girl began to dream again. She imagined a future where she could help her village from a distance, where she could learn more skills to support herself and others, and where she could continue to grow in strength and confidence. These dreams were not grand or far-fetched. They were simple, achievable, and filled with hope. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that they could come true. One afternoon, Jacob suggested they take a longer ride across the plains, further than she had gone before. The girl felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a little nervousness. She mounted her horse confidently, the reins firm in her hands, and set off with Jacob at her side. The open plains stretched endlessly before them, the wind carrying the scent of wild flowers and grass. As they rode, the girl felt a sense of liberation. She realized that the journey that had once been about escape was now becoming one of growth, discovery, and self-reliance. During their ride, they came across a small stream. The water sparkled under the sun, and the girl paused to let her horse drink. She knelt by the edge, cupping her hands to splash water on her face. The cool water felt refreshing, cleansing not just the dust of travel, but also the lingering fear she had carried for so long. Jacob watched quietly, a soft smile on his face. He knew that these moments, small and simple as they seemed, were powerful in shaping her confidence and sense of self. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they returned to Red Willow. The girl noticed how the colors of the sky mirrored the changes within her, warm, bright, and full of possibility. She understood that she had come a long way, not just in distance, but in strength, courage, and self-belief. She was no longer a girl defined by fear and tears. She was someone who had faced her challenges, learned from them, and grown into a person capable of hope, joy, and connection. Back in town, the girl continued to build relationships. She helped the innkeeper prepare meals, assisted the blacksmith with small tasks, and even began teaching younger children simple lessons she had learned from Jacob. With each act of kindness, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her experiences, her struggles, fears, and moments of courage had equipped her with wisdom that could help others. She had transformed her pain into strength and her fear into compassion. One evening, as she and Jacob sat outside the inn watching the stars, the girl reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the moment she had first arrived in Red Willow, tearful and afraid, unsure of who she could trust or where she could go. Now, she felt a quiet pride in herself. She had learned to face her fears, accept help when needed, and take steps toward independence and confidence. The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to a place of safety, understanding, and hope. Jacob spoke softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've grown a lot since the day you arrived," he said. "You've shown courage, kindness, and a strength that many people never discover in their lives. I'm proud of you." The girl smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized that pride in herself was something she had never allowed before. She had always been focused on survival, on hiding, or on avoiding judgment. Now, she could see herself clearly and acknowledge her own strength. The girl's thoughts turned to her family and village. She knew that one day she might return, not out of fear, but with the confidence to support and help in meaningful ways. She had learned that courage and love could coexist, that leaving was not a betrayal, but a step toward understanding and helping those she cared for. With the lessons she had learned in Red Willow and the guidance she had received from Jacob, she felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited her in the future. In the days that followed, the girl continued to thrive. She walked through the town with confidence, smiled freely, and helped wherever she could. Her relationship with Jacob remained steady and supportive, a reminder that trust and guidance could help someone grow without taking away their independence. The townsfolk admired her resilience, her kindness, and her quiet determination. They began to see her as more than just a visitor. She had become a part of the community, someone who brought light and hope to those around her. At night, she often looked up at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the tears, the fear, and the uncertainty that had once defined her. But she also remembered the moments of courage, the acts of kindness she had received, and the quiet guidance that had helped her discover her own strength. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges. But she no longer feared them as she once had. She had learned that courage, trust, and hope were powerful tools, and with them, she could face anything. As the story of the young native girl came full circle, it became clear that her journey was not just about reaching a new place, it was about discovering herself. She had learned that it was possible to feel fear and still act bravely, to accept help while remaining independent, and to build connections without losing her sense of self. The path ahead was still open and full of possibilities, and she was ready to walk it with confidence, hope, and the knowledge that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The stars shone brightly over Red Willow, a silent witness to the girl's growth and transformation. With Jacob by her side, the town's support, and her own inner strength, she faced the future not with fear, but with courage, joy, and the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. And in that moment, she knew that she no longer had to pretend. She could simply be herself, fully, freely, and bravely.